Hi there, I'm Jen, and this is Remembered Reads. This is my July 2016 wrap-up. This month I read these. I was kind of heavy on the very plot-driven, traditional-ish fantasy. I was just in that kind of mood, I think. I read the first two books in Robin Hobb's Fitz and the Fool Trilogy, which is the third trilogy that she's done that involves Fitz Chivalry, who was from the Farseer trilogy, was the original one, and then was the Tawny Man trilogy, which is in the same world that her other series are also based on. I wasn't a huge fan of the Tawny Man series, but I've loved almost all of her other stories and her world building and world evolution, so I was excited to pick these up. And I was really surprised at how much more I liked these than I liked the Tawny Man ones, because I felt like in those books, she had almost undid some of what I liked about the way the first series ended, where it had that balance of things worked out well for the society, but not necessarily for the characters. But this series, characters are older, and it was interesting to me because in the first book, before they really get into the quest part, the more traditional fantasy part, it's very much about Fitz dealing with his normal sort of midlife issues where you're worried about your family and, do you have to take care of your siblings or your cousins' kids, and are your children making the right decisions, and do you worry, or your friends or relatives, are they starting to have early onset dementia, or what's happening, your house is falling apart, which was interesting because I feel like you don't see a lot of that, especially in plot-driven fantasy like this, because it tends to be more about younger characters going forth and discovering themselves, and this is somebody he's discovered himself, and now he's dealing with life. Yeah, I mean, of course, there is a quest, and it gets more into the traditional questing for magic and everything. But I really liked that was the opening, and that was neat to see. So those were fun. I'm looking forward to the third one. After I read that, I read some franchise stuff. This is A Moving Target, a Princess Leia adventure, which is one of the books that came out before Force Awakens came out last year. I mean, they're kids' books, and they're fun, and they're fluffy, and you have to read them with that in mind. One wasn't bad, and I feel like if you were reading this with your, say, 8-year-old who's just discovering Star Wars and you've just watched the original movies, because this is set between the original Star Wars and Empire, it would be awesome. And I feel like as a kid, I would have loved this. As an adult, it's okay. I picked up the first volume of the DC Bombshells series, which is called Enlisted. It's this alternate universe, World War II era, mostly the female DC characters in different settings and in their pinup costumes. I really like the idea of it, and I like 90% of the artwork. There's an art change near the end, and I wasn't a huge fan of the second art style. But it's a lot of fun. I really like the look of everything. I like alternate history versions of well-known superhero characters. But as a story, this is all the introduction bits, so it's not really a story on its own. And I don't know how interesting this would be to people who weren't already fans of the characters in the regular universe, because part of what makes it humorous is seeing how they're set differently there. But it was still cool, and I really like the way it looks. Then I ended the month by reading the first 2 volumes in Brian McClellan's Powder Mage trilogy, Promise of Blood and The Crimson Campaign. They're fun, especially if you're into the kind of industrial revolution type fantasy, flintlock fantasy, muskets and magic, whatever you want to call that genre. They're a lot of fun. They feel like, if you like fantasy and you like Bernard Cornwell's Sharp series, these are great. As literature on their own, probably not great, but they're fun. I have one unfinished book from the month, but there's technically 2. One is M.G. Vizinji's No New Land, which I had thought I'd read before, but reading it, I don't really remember it, so maybe I didn't. And The other one that I is A Brief History of Seven Killings, which I'm slogging through. I don't know why it's been such a slog to get through, but it's been slow. I will finish that book eventually, but I haven't at this point. And that was the month. So that's it. Ciao.